Like I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, the beginning sequence when it comes to the thing that starts up the movie, which is that a person's car gets bombed crossing the Mexican border. It starts off pretty interesting in that aspect. And with the way that that sequence is shot, it really is a really well done scene. And I understand why a lot of people praise that scene specifically, because it is so well shot and it is done so well with the timing and the acting that I understand why so many people love that specific sequence. It's great. There are some examples that I have when it comes to Mike Vargas and Charlton Heston's performance in this. And it mainly is two things. One, it's when he gets pointed out that he's a Mexican and he's for his country people and he's trying to help his own people. It becomes really distracting, especially in the scene where they're interrogating and torturing the one guy who they're trying to pin that has dynamite in his apartment. Like, that scene just felt really odd because, one, you had to listen to Charlton Heston speak Spanish, and he's not good at it at all. It is really, really distracting. It is like, I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker by any means, but even I can recognize, like, that you're not comfortable with that language, are you? Oh no. So there's that problem in that scene as well. God, there's so, like, with Mike Vargas and Charlton Heston specifically, there's so many problems. Like, there really is. Again, Charlton Heston doesn't even try to sound Mexican, which I want to thank him for it to a certain extent, but I also have to point out how little effort he put into into this performance. I know for a fact if he tried to act like a Spanish-speaking Mexican person, it would sound terrible, but but on the other hand, I can't excuse it. It's just so bad. It's so bad. But let's get into, like, more of the positive stuff. Let's get into Quinlan, which is played by Orson Welles. This is a great character. This is a character that, if they just focus the entire movie on him and his corrupt investigation style, I think would have been maybe not as good as a movie, maybe not a classic, but I think it would have been an interesting movie to dive into. Wells plays him really well, and he plays him as not as detestable as you think he is. Like, you want to at certain points, I wanted to believe that he would show the good cop in him, but the movie doesn't allow that to a certain extent because they want Vargas to be the good cop and they want him to be the bad cop and the drama to be centered around that, which I understood. It is an interesting juxtaposition to watch Wells kill it in his performance and watch Heston just completely demolish his character. That I just couldn't honestly sit through. Well, I sat through the entire film just fine, but it was just really hard to find myself rooting for Vargas when it means I have to watch Heston play Vargas. It's awful. It's absolutely terrible. And then I mentioned it in the non-spoiler review. If you have Mexican actors playing actual Mexicans in the movie that are in the crime area, I don't understand if you can get Mexicans to play those roles, why you couldn't find a good Mexican actor to play Vargas. I don't understand that. Like, I wouldn't say I would almost excuse it if all the Mexicans were played by white people in shoe polish. Maybe I would, because maybe then I could be like, okay, I guess it's part of the time, whatever, okay. But it just makes the Heston Vargas thing much more distracting. Much more. And yeah, I said it in the non-spoiler review. This is not something that usually bothers me, but in this movie specifically, I just couldn't get past it. So, and it's going to affect the review. It really will. Like, my rating is going to be rather lower. It's going to be a lot lower than what most would in this. Other than that, that's all I can say about when it comes to Quinlan and Vargas. Susan Vargas, the one played by Janet Leigh, a part of me wishes she wasn't even in the movie. She was only used, really, to be a distraction to Miguel Vargas. And they kept having to double back onto her, back and forth, and it kind of messed with the flow of the film. Like, I sat here a couple and Janet Leigh's fine in the movie, but I really sat there going, throughout the film, okay, she's just a distraction. That's all this is. It's going to lead to Vargas having to choose at some point between her and putting Quinlan to justice. And that would be interesting. That would have been pretty interesting to deal with, but no, they didn't go that route, really. They made it no bone. They made nothing to make that relationship interesting other than, oh, Miguel Vargas is married to a white woman, and that's it. Like, what was the point of that? Really, what was the point of doing that? So, yeah, I had a lot of issues with this movie, and yeah, I expected a lot more out of this, and I didn't get it, but oh well. Let us get into the final thoughts of Touch of Evil. I can admit, by watching the movie, listening to the dialogue, and how the story unfolds, that I can understand why this movie is as celebrated as it is. It is for a noir, it's a very good movie. However, and I firmly believe that in order to films to continue to be great, they have to age gracefully as well. That's why something like Casablanca still is great, because it has that really good dialogue in it, and why movies like Barry Lyndon is really good, and 2001, and I can go on with a bunch of others that are really good movies that, despite how old they are, they still end up being very good no matter what time you watch them. Touch of Evil is not that. It really isn't. It is dated on one key aspect, and because the key aspect is dated on the main character that you have to follow throughout the entire film, it is a major distraction. It was a major distraction to me. And it turned what could have been, I would say, a 3.5, 4-star film to a 2.5. It was, and that's my rating. It's a 2.5 out of 5 of this. Very, not what I was expecting. I sat through the film being majorly disappointed because I wanted to enjoy it, but I kept getting distracted by Charlton Heston's performance. And even if Charlton Heston's performance wasn't of a Mexican cop, it wasn't that great of a performance either, so it made it doubly distracting. I think, if you can get over that fact, this is a very good noir movie. But I think even people like me who say to themselves, oh, that stuff doesn't bother me, and I get it's from a different time, it's not that big of a deal, I think some of you might still get distracted by this. Or maybe I'm becoming much more sensitive about it in my old age. That is a possibility, but I seriously think that Charlton Heston's performance kind of ruins this movie to an extent. I give it 2.5 out of 5. I may revisit it one day, but I don't know when. I just was majorly disappointed by Touch of Evil.